is the best school in the world? As a high school senior just weeks away from graduating, this is a question that I think about a lot. Same with all my friends. Google has a ton of school and university rankings, but I always wonder how those rankings are calculated. High school rankings are based on things like test scores, AP scores, and graduation rates. University rankings are often based on things like number of publications, grants, and reputation. But these types of metrics don't give much of an insight into the learning environment. Like, is it welcoming, inspiring, inclusive, empowering? Does it integrate technology? Does it eliminate barriers and encourage teamwork and collaboration? Does it build a culture that gives students the confidence to take risks, to explore, and to grow? Does it understand the diversity of its students and help them to fulfill their unique and infinite potential? For me, someone who loves school and who's excited to go to college next year, what is the best school is a personal question. But what is the best education is also a universal one, with enormous implications for the future of our world. Millions of children and young people do not have the opportunity to attend school. Most of the children who are excluded from educational opportunities are girls. In some countries, as few as 6% of girls graduate from high school and only 2% go on to university. I used open source data from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics to model the association between girls' education and the productivity of nations. Despite the brilliance and ambition of girls around the world, their participation in tertiary education has not risen much over the past 2 decades, and in sub-Saharan Africa it remains about 7%. I've heard it said that girls' education is one of the most powerful forces in economic development. The UNESCO data showed associations between girls' attendance in tertiary and secondary education and GDP. According to the World Bank, limited educational opportunities for girls and barriers to completing 12 years of education cost countries as much as $30 trillion. And people were beginning to take notice. Around the world, governments, NGOs, education systems were increasingly realizing that educating girls can lift generations, communities, and nations out of poverty. Then the pandemic struck. According to the World Bank, COVID-19 has created the worst crisis in education and learning in a century. At the height of school closures, about 1.6 billion children around the planet were out of school. The problem is so complex. Students not only stopped advancing, they were actually losing ground on critical areas like reading comprehension and mathematics. An index of education achievement, the educational poverty rate, which is the proportion of children at the end of primary school that could read and understand a simple story, is projected to drop from 63% to 53% in low and middle income countries due to the pandemic. Social, emotional, and physical health were also affected, with high reports of negative feelings, skyrocketing rates of violence and teenage pregnancy, and rising childhood obesity. These effects are more pronounced in low-income areas, and especially for girls. COVID-19's dual financial and educational crises have pulled children out of school, often permanently, with a cost to society that is estimated to be $17 trillion, or 14% of the global GDP. Amazingly, only 3% of COVID stimulus funding has been directed at education, and 97% of this money has been invested in high-income countries. There is so much urgency on so many levels. An analysis by McKinsey & Company suggests that action taken now could help avoid economic losses by trillions of dollars per year. But the question is, what action? This is a unique moment in history to reimagine the future of education, to redesign it, to not only address historical shortcomings, but to also transform opportunities. In some ways, post-pandemic education redesign gives us an opportunity to re-examine our ideas about the best school in the world. In addition to modifying curricula and investing in teachers, we will also have an opportunity to rethink school design. To me, this is one of the best schools in the world. This is the New Beginning Secondary School in Malawi, which comes into view at the top of a dirt road that winds up from the highway. Its single-level brick buildings neatly frame a rectangular courtyard with a full basketball court that is the stage for the vibrant energy of 400 students and hundreds of other neighborhood kids. From sunrise to sunset, the school, even without access to electricity or computers or Wi-Fi, is the beautiful heart and promise of the community. At one end of the court stand 2 water towers, from the top of which you can see the court below and the bustling city around. And until 2 years ago, the court was empty on the opposite side. It was just a slope that drifted down to the school's back boundary wall. Even pre-pandemic, many of the students, for one reason or another, did not end up going to university. There are many explanations for this, but we began to focus on educational resources in the school itself, starting with access to technology. After many inspiring conversations with the school's directors and educators, we came up with an idea of repurposing a shipping container into a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics lab. This is a rendering of the original idea, the lab sitting on campus on the edge of the basketball court, that we used to brainstorm and to get ideas from the school's community of educators and leaders. I spent 2 years raising money and planning before the container finally arrived. With a team of mentors and friends, we started the build and acquired, installed, and tested solar panels in the dark and rainy winter in Vancouver to ensure we could generate enough power for the lab. And we experimented with the exterior design and the use of indoor-outdoor learning environments. And we found a name for the lab to reflect the potential of the students who would use it: the Bloom Box. Everything was disassembled and lovingly packaged up. The Bloom Box hit the high seas in February last year. In the midst of the pandemic, the New York Times said it was the worst time in all of history to ship a container. All we could do was pray. In July last year, we almost lost everything on multiple occasions. The entire community, though, came to help unload the container. About a week in, with about half the time we'd planned for, and a team that grew to include Mike, our driver and engineer, and volunteers who lived on the other side of the hill, the Bloom Box installation was taking shape. In the space of about 2 weeks, we leveled the slope and built a foundation for the Bloom Box. We moved from design to installation. All these ideas about the design of education environments from everyone who cared about the school, and 2 years of uninterrupted design, sourcing, and coordination were suddenly there for us to see. And when the doors opened and the lights went on in the Bloom Box, it was one of the most breathtaking moments of my whole life. We thought about the space based on a few major principles. We wanted to make it safe and secure. We wanted to eliminate barriers, create multi-purpose spaces that integrated technology and facilitated indoor-outdoor learning. And of course, all of this had to be sustainable. I even got to keep designing when I returned home. The foundation was high, and my friend Peter, the chair of the school's board, had an idea to create some bleachers to integrate the lab better with the court and its surroundings. There it is. The Bloom Box has been up and running for about 8 months now, and it's already transforming the educational environment at NBSS, especially for girls. The vast majority of students found that the lab experience was fun, and that the computers and local servers were being used for more purposes than we'd imagined. And many of the students wanted more time in the lab and more computers. Monitored remotely, we can even track how many kids are on the educational system at a given time and what the most popular hits are. Post-pandemic education redesign is an example of a wicked problem. A wicked problem is a problem that is difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognize. It refers to an idea or problem that cannot be fixed, where there's no single solution to the problem. In an effort to solve one aspect of a wicked problem, there may be revealed other problems because of complex interdependencies. Design thinking is an approach to wicked problems that starts with an attempt to deeply understand the problem and then to create, prototype, and test solutions. It is a creative and collaborative process that encourages new ways of thinking and that is open to diverse ideas. Design thinking creates art and builds rockets and advances science and technology in creative collaboratives, startups, and universities around the world. Without knowing it, the Bloom Box kind of followed these 6 stages of design thinking. Design thinking starts with why. Like, why is this challenge important? To begin to even think about how it might be fixable, we need who is affected and how. To do that, we need to start from a point of empathy. Beginning with empathy is a way to connect with humility and openness to the challenges that people experience. This is also known as human-centered design. It is critical to listen and to feel problems, to consider how they affect lives, and go deeper into the underlying issues that led to these problems. Starting with empathy provides the fuel to keep pushing through the inevitable challenges and failures, and the humility to learn from those failures. Next, we move from empathy to ideation, or the brainstorming of ideas and exploring technical challenges and diverse approaches. Ideation eventually leads to some definition of design principles. This definition stage is the point at which out-of-the-box ideas begin to focus on possibilities for innovative solutions. Such design leads to prototypes, which can totally fail sometimes. But when you're truly innovating, sometimes the only marker of progress is failure. The amazing thing is that failures are learning opportunities. Next, every prototype of whatever solution you're designing has to be tested and retested and then continuously perfected. And then you do it all again. You keep cycling through solutions to get closer and closer to a chosen one. The iterative part comes next. On one of the last days of the Bloombox installation, I got a chance to think about what might be next. With drills spinning and a grinder throwing sparks across the foundation and 18 solar panels moving into position overhead, I walked 10 members of the Malawi Ministry of Education through the site on a Zoom call. I had hoped to get their support to scale the idea to other schools, and thanks to the help of my mentors at the school, they had agreed to take a call with me. They were a bit skeptical at first, and their questions about power, remote access, sourcing, and other things were detailed and challenging. I did my best to understand where they were leading me. At one point, I took them up, by Zoom of course, to the roof of the Bloombox, and I stood with them in the midst of the glittering solar panels, with the school campus and the city below. When they saw that we laid out the solar arrays and panels, I think that was the turning point. On an early morning a few months later, we met again and I pitched a proposal at their request about the Bloombox from the kitchen table, my parents inconspicuously hiding in the pantry so as not to throw me off with their nervous excitement. The ministry expressed interest in scaling the lab to 5% of Malawi secondary schools over the next 5 years. Reaching this target would create new learning opportunities for 20,000 students at 70 schools. The next Bloomboxes will be built in Africa because that will be true sustainability. The teams I've met will span from South Africa to Malawi with construction that will support microeconomies that employ young people all along the way. We've learned a lot from Bloombox 1 deployed in urban Blantyre, but to meet the ministry's vision, Bloombox 2.0 will have new challenges. Rural settings call for higher mobility, security, and simplicity in design, plus figuring out ways to promote local leadership. Right now, we're imagining a 10-foot shipping container that's half the size with a retractable roof system and ability to charge up technology. It might exist as an annex to existing classroom spaces. It will kind of look like a flower. I believe it will work because it has to work and because the teams that believe in this project can make magic. I've seen it before. I'm starting university in the fall and I'm really excited to step into new spaces and ready to learn everything I can about photovoltaic technology, architecture, education policy, and sustainable global development. One day, I plan to open up my own firm. I want to design beautiful and inclusive spaces and channel resources into building sustainable schools and homes in sub-Saharan Africa. I hope to use design thinking to solve our most important and our most wicked challenges, with other architects and designers on the come up like me. It's true that I've spent a lot of time thinking about the best school in the world. I know now that the best school depends on the metric used, and that no single metric can capture what is truly important. In my opinion, the best schools in the world are the ones that connect girls to the environments that capture their imaginations, and that connect societies with the infinite potential of their girls, that make high-quality education available to everyone. I go to a school like that. My Bloombox mentors in Malawi and around the world have created these learning environments for me. I want to build the best schools in the world. I want every girl to go to the best school in the world. Thank you.